Welcome to the Bloom House Podcast with Meris Gantt and Andrea Elaver. Meris started a wedding planning business and grew as an entrepreneur. Andrea went the corporate event path. 10 years later, they're still learning from each other and comparing notes. From kids' playdates to ballrooms to boardrooms, they're still best friends, and they're sharing what they know, one episode at a time.
Today, we decided, after much conversation last time, that maybe we would like to ask each other some questions to try to find a way to introduce each other to other audiences, but keeping it spontaneous.
And not scripted.
Right. So while I was journaling one day, thought of some questions that I thought would be fun, that I would love to hear what Meris had to say about. My first one is a little bit career, because, we're definitely focusing a little bit on our, how we got to where we are in our lives in business. And you've had kind of a crazy journey. So my first question is, tell me your path from where you started from college, where you thought you were going to be, to business owner in the highlights reel. Not like for your CV, but like for yourself. What do you think are the highlights for what got you from there to here?
Okay. Thank you for asking me an easy question first. Because with me, I feel like I'm either going to freeze or I'm funny. One or the other, but not in the middle. So in college, I studied music theater, not just music, but music theater, which, as we joke now in the wedding planning world, is a little bit like directing a children's musical. But then I think by the end of college, got a little, burnout, imposter syndrome, maybe realizing I didn't want to live in a big city. So shelved that, kind of went off the grid for a while, moved around some, worked in restaurants. So a lot of restaurant work, I think. So theater plus restaurant work is really what qualifies me to be an event planner, or what I thought at the time when I just decided I might be good at that. So for my wedding, I did actually have a wedding planner, but it was a friend. It was somebody that did do it professionally. But when I got engaged, she said, "Ooh, I'll plan your wedding." And I was like, okay, I didn't know that was a job. Cool. Thank you, And the whole time I kind of felt silly, oh, this is my wedding planner, but I don't really know what that means. And then on the day of my wedding, I realized how awesome it was just to be able to say, when somebody came up to me with a burning, time-sensitive question, to just say, "I don't know, go find Cassandra." And just that. I'm sure I said that 20 times that day. And we had a really modest DIY chill wedding, but there's still, even with that, the day would have been terrible without her. She did everything. Fast forward to, I was in real estate at the time, which that wasn't the correct fit for whatever life phase I was in there. And I was working in restaurants, and I had a 1-year-old, and real estate was just proving it's not the right fit. So I remember saying to my husband one night, because this lady that planned my wedding was leaving town to go do other things forever. And I remember saying to her, "Hi, can I have your business?" And she said, "Sure." I was like, okay, I think I'd be good at wedding planning. So I read a lot of books because there weren't the podcasts and the resources that we have now. So I just bought some used books by Emily Post and others about how to plan weddings. And I was decently good at building websites because, with real estate, I had more time than money. So I got really good at blogging. So I was like, oh, well, this is no harder than that. So I built a website, and here we are.
Yeah. So now looking back on all of that, if you had to pick 3 steps that led you from there to here, what do you think the big moments that were turning points to your lives?
Ooh, that's a really good question, because I feel like there are a lot of them, and I want to journal on it.
Sure.
But
I feel like you sort of said it. I feel like in the moment of college and feeling disillusioned with where you were headed, and then going to take a minute to find yourself.
I definitely did. I went to California. Was super hippie, literally just worked in restaurants for years, which I totally recommend to college graduates. Anytime we have interns, I feel like here's what I always get from them. They'll say, "Well, I really want to do this one, whatever, fun, aspirational kind of silly thing after college, but my parents really want me to do this." And I'm like, oh my God, do nothing after college. You have your whole life to be a grown up.
And once you're in the system, it's hard to leave.
It's hard to leave.
But
exactly.
It's not that hard to get in.
You
just
really
stay in contact with your contacts.
Right. But like you can get out of college and just do whatever. And I feel like a lot of people don't feel that way. And I think it's because I had a little bit of an atypical upbringing where my parents never expected us to have, I don't know, it never seemed like any of us were going to be like doctors, lawyers, and that kind of stuff just because my parents were entrepreneurs. And I just assumed that's.
They figured you'd find your way.
I guess. Is that what they figured? I mean, when I said, I'm going to go to school to study theater, they were like, well, obviously. Like, what?
Well, your mom raised you that way.
I know. But it's kind of crazy. I mean, I guess I would do the same thing for my kid, right? I mean, I guess we all would.
I mean, he's going to be a soccer pro, right?
So yeah, I don't know if I answered your question, but it was a really good question and I want to write more about it.
Can you talk a little more about the crossovers between theater and event planning? You did it in a one-line joke, but like, really, what do you feel like when you think about what you learned in theater and then how that connects to what you do now? Because I know we draw on it all the time.
All the time. I think I could just do a really long list, like being comfortable speaking to people, to groups, being aware of just like how you present yourself to the world. I think there's just the overall production element of it, like the networking, like how the different pieces work together from like the set design to the lights, to the sound, to the actors, to the orchestra, because that is what, especially when we have some of these like really bigger events, that's what it feels like. It feels like we're putting on a show.
Heck yeah.
And obviously it's about so much more than that, but it does feel like production. And see, I just got goosebumps because that feels really fun to me. So before college, I didn't direct a lot in college. I think I assistant directed a show because I didn't get into it. And it was like I needed a credit for winter term or something. But in high school, I really directed. I was very involved in our very small Southport community theater. And I just decided I would direct shows. Like in general, like I did like 3 of them in high school to where I would actually be looking through catalogs of like plays that you could buy and be like, okay, how much is this? Okay, we can afford this. And I would actually like post auditions in the newspaper and hold them and direct the whole thing. And I would go around to the shops and get them to donate for my program. And I would hire the moms as costume designers. My parents even like landscaped the stage for one show. Like I did the lights, I did the audio. I did all of it on pretty big scale productions when I was like 16. And not to say like it was like world class, like amazing quality. Like, no.
But
I don't even know how I
picture.
did. But that's why when you were asking me about the theater here and I was talking about wanting to do more theater and I was like, why don't you just do a show? I was like, oh my God. It's like my childhood where I just was like, oh, you can do that. You can just go to the board of the theater and tell them that you're doing this thing and that you're going to hire it and finance it. And you're allowed to just do it. They just let you do it. Which again, I guess, okay, how about this? So for the tie of here to here, it's just like all that childhood stuff translated into like, oh, well, I can do that. I can do whatever I want. So.
Absolutely. And then that goes to you going, yeah, I'll take over your business. I'm sure I'd be good at that.
I'm sure I can be a wedding planner. Yeah. But I think we talk about this all the time, and this will be a running theme on the show, just the service and hospitality aspect of wedding planning. And of course, people see it as this fun, sparkly thing, which it is. It absolutely is. But it's sort of like if you don't have a strong foundation in some form of either like corporate, hospitality, restaurant, or ideally all 3, then I don't know, you're just not that grounded in the business maybe.
In order to get, I mean, I see it, of course, similar background, that how do you get the flow of the event right when you simultaneously need to put on a dramatic show, put on another dramatic show in a different location, feed 200 people, and keep the place beautiful the entire time throughout? Like it's all of these, that keeping the audience in awe through all of these pieces, but also scurrying around, making sure that at every turn, no one sees the mechanism while you're feeding them and cleaning up after them. And I mean, there's so many mechanisms that go into that hospitality side simultaneously with the luxury experience, with the feeling taken care of in a beautiful environment where, you know, people are being paraded past you and announcements are made and bands are performing and choreographed dances are performed. And I mean, there's so many things simultaneously happening. It's a multi-level performance.
That level of multitasking, right? Yeah. And just seeing the things, I think with a theater background, you're aware of the lighting. I mean, most of the time, sometimes you forget, but it's like they're doing the first dance and you're like, oh, it's too bright. Like we need to dim the lights, or this band is too loud, or the timing of things. Like when you're sending the wedding party out and they're like being announced, there's some theatrics to the rate at which you were sending people even down the aisle.
You're directing a ceremony. It is theater direction.
It is theater direction. So yeah, that's why it never gets old, because it's like a new show all the time.
You have to always be seeing the big picture. When you're directing a play, you go in with a vision of what the finished product is supposed to look like. And then when you get there, you're the one who can tell if it's off and adjust it to correct it, to make it right. And the tricky part is you get less rehearsals.
Right.
You get one quick rehearsal, but and
they're not paying attention.
It's
not the same.
But it's that experience level of you do lots of events. And so you get that feeling of knowing how to communicate with all of the different staff levels. And I think there's something about having come from a directing background that if you can talk to and be directed, it happens both ways. But, coming from a directing side, to figure out how to tell someone, you're reminding them that they're being watched. It's a very vulnerable thing to direct someone. So it's also the subtlety of saying, hey, I see that there's this, and you might want to think about this. And how to phrase those things and make people still feel good in the moment is so key. And then the other piece being that the people you're directing are your clients. That also, you turn it on its head, and there's a way in which you're performing for them. And you need to constantly, demonstrate to them that you're in control and you understand what's happening, and that you're taking care of them simultaneously. You're also performing for them while you are directing them.
Ooh, the plot thickens. I love it. Yeah,
and that's where the taking direction comes in, is you've got to have a thick skin too, because sometimes people are frustrated. And it's not just the client that might get frustrated. It's the other vendors who are working maybe in a location where they didn't understand what the setup was, and they get there and they're like, oh no, like how do I get out? How do I perform my best in this situation? And you're smoothing ruffled feathers all the way around the room sometimes. Other days there's none of that.
The all around the room thing. Yeah, I think that more because I don't feel like we have a lot of confrontational moments with clients. That's never really, honestly. But I think there's a whole lot of a client is concerned about another vendor, and we're the one that has to go to that vendor and somehow, very kindly convey what the client wants, or just if we see something wrong, that whole thing of managing people, but in a really kind and beautiful way. When tensions are so high.
And managing people who never worked for you in the first place.
And definitely don't think they work for you now, because I don't know if you know this, but people typically, I would beg to say 60% of the time, people don't like wedding planners. They don't think they like them. They have a stigma in their head of what they think a wedding planner is, and they think that they're going to come in and boss them around and be rather shrill and very type A.
Demanding.
So I think diffusing that immediately is something I focus a lot on. And it's that initial call with the couple, but then with everybody else, you're coming in at the rehearsal and you're immediately bossing them around. They don't know you. They don't think they like you. And you got 5 minutes to really turn them around as to whether they think you're so fun or not so fun.
I feel like one of my tricks for that is I show up with the vendors and go, what can I do for you?
Same.
It's always, what do you need to make your day smoother?
Even those week of calls.
Saying, hey, I'm here for you. And, how many cars are you bringing? Let me make sure that when you get there, the parking is the way you need it to be. How much space do you need for your equipment? Let me make sure that the load-in is where you need it to be. That I'm going to go in front of them and grease the wheels for them. I'm not there to yell at them once they walk in the door.
Right. Yeah, no, that's the big thing. And you were talking about the vendors and I was just talking about groomsmen, but same thing, same thing. This year we have started sending out, not every wedding, it's a read the room situation, but we will offer to send out a wedding party email a couple weeks, whatever the couple wants, a couple weeks out, the week of, an email sent to go out during the rehearsal dinner or rehearsal with the timeline, and also our cell phone. So yes, we're giving out our cell phone to the whole wedding party and saying, please call us. Don't call the bride. Call us here's your timeline. It's immediately putting us as like in charge, but also like, what do you need? We're here for you. We want this weekend to be everything you want it to be. I just think humor for rehearsal. Like if you can be funny, if you are at all a funny person,
and that's the performance
be funny
again.
Oh, back to it. See, be funny. Okay, I'm like telling all my secrets, but I actually like made it a point to be funny at rehearsal like 5 years ago. Do you remember me telling you this?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know who was there. Maybe it was Anna or somebody, but I left that rehearsal and I was like, I feel like I killed it. And then like the whole weekend was so easy because I don't know, they just thought I was really funny. I don't know if I journaled after that and wrote down what I should say or anything that I thought was funny, but I was like, be funny. Be funny. They want you to be funny at a rehearsal. And then they know you're not like all those other wedding planners that they think they don't like.
Yeah,
So.
you're there to help them enjoy themselves.
Right. Now I'm going to ask Andrea a couple questions. Starting with, what is your favorite productivity hack?
Oh, God, that is not my strong suit.
What? I thought you had a ton. Are you being sarcastic?
You're right. I'm one walking hack.
Well, but we hate that word. We a little bit hate that word.
That's right. So for me, with getting myself started, I'm very much a create my environment the way I need it to be, keep everything organized and tidy, and then put the things in front of me that are going to get me excited about what I need to do next.
Example.
Like it's the enthusiasm of the project that always gets me going. Being the enthusiast that I am, that maybe it's that I start with a layout because I love the visual part of it first. So if I've got a new event to do, I might start with, I'm going to lay it out so that I can picture it. Once I can picture it, then before I know what's happening, I'm doing the 7 other things to get from that being a picture on paper to that being a real thing.
I think that's the opposite of how I do it. I never lead with a layout. That's funny.
I love to lead with a layout. I'll draw.
I want to
it.
lead with like the timeline.
I sketch first. I totally draw first.
That's amazing. I wish I was one of those people, but no. I'm like, let's break down your budget, talk about when everything's happening.
And then I go there.
Yeah. Fun.
Break it into the pieces.
I actually like starting with the layout. I might adopt that actually. How fun. Another product.
Well, I guess on mine, the kind of events I'm doing, a lot of times I'm ordering all of the details and picking the vendors and doing all of the pieces versus a client coming with it already. So if I start with a layout, I'll know how many flower arrangements I want to order.
That makes sense.
How many linens am I ordering? I can't contact anyone until I know what I need. So that's part of, it's my chopping block.
I think that's a little bit of a good segue to just talk a little bit about what you do.
Sure. I'm an event planner for a university. And so we do fundraising events and a lot of like constituency relations is one of the popular terms. So basically networking kinds of events for the chancellor's office and for just a lot of different divisions on campus internally. And then for all of the fundraising divisions to maintain our connection to donors or groups like the trustees or the foundation board that support the university to make sure that they know on a regular basis that we're thinking of them and giving them an opportunity to stay connected and excited about what we're doing.
What do you think is the biggest difference between events in a more corporate setting and the wedding world? Like basically difference between your job and my job. Let's just get right to it.
I think the starting point is so different. For you, you're starting with mapping out what someone's vision is. And for what I do, we start with what the strategy is.
Ooh.
So it's what is the goal of this event? The events we're having are never without a goal. There's a goal in mind with everything we do. And there's usually some information being put in front of the audience. So you have to figure out how you're going to deliver that for the most impact. And, what's the mood you want to set? That comes after the strategy.
Love that. I feel like tacking on for weddings, my goal as a planner is to keep my client's eye on the bigger picture. And keep them grounded in what's real and not just have like shiny object syndrome. And as far as like their goals, we love it if they're, more, how do you want it to feel? What do you want your guest experience to be like? And less of a like, I want it to look pretty. But yeah, keeping them true to their own vision, managing, we can do a whole episode on managing client expectations, but just staying true to themselves. Like their goal is different, but it's still keeping them on track for their
You're
goal.
pulling them into the storytelling of
correct.
Of what do you want over here and what's the outcome of it. So a little bit is coming to them you're trying to prompt them to get to what their strategies are.
Yes. I love that through line.
And I think, a lot of times you'll get a client, back from when I was doing weddings, that they come and they're like, well, this represents me and this represents me and this represents him and this represents him. And we want it to be a mashup of the two of us. Mm-hmm. But they haven't thought about putting together a bigger storytelling piece. They've just sort of brought a couple of elements they both resonated with. Mm-hmm. So it's about bringing cohesion in that storytelling.
And helping them discover sort of their why. Sometimes when a client is dead set on doing something that doesn't make any sense to me from like a strategic point or a guest point, or like I'm just sort of like not sure why they're doing it, sometimes I'll ask, why is this important to you? And what you usually get is a very emotional answer. You know what I mean? It's usually something that you're like,
it's heart level.
Oh, yes, exactly. If they're doing something that's really out of my framework and I think is weird, that's really something that I think I heard that on a podcast this year and was like, oh my gosh, and started asking it. And the response I've gotten in the last 6 months since I started asking that makes me understand my clients more. And I said that to my other planners as well, because I'm always like, and I heard this thing on a podcast and we should be asking this. Just the psychology behind it.
Yeah, I think the connection to where I'm coming from, there is the repeat customer or client situation for me. Right. That like the audience, it's these same people. So I know we've done this for them last year. We did this for them the year before. And we did this for them. So to know how to keep track of what compliments did you get that people came back and were like, oh my gosh, that got me, like that pumped me up. This made me feel seen. And recognizing that at the end of the day, these events are for in my world, they're for people. And they're the same people that they were for before. So to show that you heard them, saw them, and remember that they're coming back is a big part of what I do. Sometimes it's remembering that, oh, this caterer makes this one thing that person can't get enough of.
And I've heard you say that so much because I work for a catering company that's worked for you. And I've heard you say like, oh, this person really likes this. We need to make sure we have this on this menu.
Mm-hmm. And even then we had someone for a while that we would have a to-go box. We'd have an extra box of pastries that every time she left an event, we just slipped her a box. And those little details in how you can bring joy to people. And then that's part of the strategy, that a lot of times the goal of the outset is to make people stay and feel and stay connected.
I love that. How fun. Mm-hmm. But also maybe more stressful in a different way, because weddings, we have so much hinging on this big day. But just the repeat customers is a whole other level.
Oh, yeah. We talked about when I first switched from weddings to this, I would wake up and just all I could think about is the list of things I wish I'd done better or things I'd literally just screwed up. And feeling like in the weddings, you sort of could, you had your relationships with vendors that were repeat and you had to make sure that you were maintaining those relationships, but that little mistakes that your clients couldn't even see because they weren't professionals in the industry and they weren't going to come and do this again. So you sort of felt like you maybe made a mistake over here, but then you weren't going to maybe make that same mistake. And if you do make that same mistake again, then you beat yourself up for it, but nobody else knows that you made this mistake twice in your life. Mm-mm. But there's that feeling of like a repeated mistake. You're like, how could I do that? Not once, but twice. But now in this environment where it's the same vendors a lot of the time and the same people attending these events, that if I make the same mistake twice, it's harder to shake off. For sure.
Well, I remember you saying that in your early years at the university, just, talking about jobs and whatnot. And I feel like I would be venting about something and you'd be like, yeah, but your mistakes aren't cumulative.
Yes.
But this was just one thing I thought of when you were talking. It like also goes back to our wardrobes. Like I have the same thing that I wear almost to every wedding. I have like the jumpsuit or the short dress or like there's 3 things that I wear on event days. And because they won't see me again, even like my sweaters and stuff that I wear to meetings. I'm like, oh, here's my country club sweater, but I can wear it for all of my meetings because they're all with different people. Whereas you're the opposite. You're like, oh, I wore this to the Christmas party last year. I couldn't possibly. And having to dress up every day for work seems horrifying where I can look like a hot mess all the time and then clean up like 2 days a week.
It's true. It was a bit of an adjustment.
Well, and your wardrobe has to be bigger. Like you have to spend more on clothes than I do.
for a daily job.
It's terrible.
I go to work every day.
It's hard. Yeah. And I feel like we have this conversation too. I'll spend a whole bunch on one piece and you're like, well, I can't do that on one piece.
I need like 50 pieces.
I'm like, it's like I'm like, I bought the new dress for the season and I can wear it to every event.
Yep. I feel like I have to label my clothes a little bit. Although I did remind myself this summer, I was like, oh, I held on to this piece because it was a good piece that I wore to something before COVID. And I was like, there's no way they remember this from 2019.
No way. I try to take if it's a 90-minute call, like a 45 minutes, like everybody take a bathroom break, turn our screens off for a second, refresh. And then yesterday I spilled my green drink all over myself, like right when I turned the screen off and I had to go change and just pop back on. I don't know if you noticed that I just changed shirts, but...
Thanks for listening to the Bloomhouse Podcast. Check out the show notes at bloomhousenc.com and connect with us on Instagram at bloomhousenc. We'll see you next time.